Good evening, everybody. Good night. Daniel Spatz interviews from Irvine, California. Very excited, very happy. Tonight we have a very special guest, Mr. Paul Annacone, former professional player, top in the world, one of the best. Paul, you're the first one. So we're going to connect right now because he's very busy. We have 40 minutes to talk to Paul, and it's going to be wonderful. And thank you, everybody, and stay healthy. That's the most important thing, okay? I'm going to give Paul Annacone the big welcome. Let's see, the tennis channel guy. Okay, it's a pleasure, a privilege to have Paul tonight, this evening. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Daniel, how you doing?
How are you doing, Paul? I'm
Good.
on my feet. I'm so excited.
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No, thank you, Paul. I was following you over the years, and as a coach, of course, I know about your career and everything. And how are you? How are you right now?
Good. Everything's good. Life is good, Daniel. Life is good. Just got back from a little training practice with Taylor Fritz, and happy to join you. And I was going to watch a little tennis this evening on Tennis Channel and see how everything's going. But yeah, everything's good. How about you? How's everything in your world?
Oh, excellent, Paul. I'm very excited. Thank you for asking. This is something that we have social media, WhatsApp, everything, but we are missing, I'm an old school guy, phone calls. What do you think about No,
No, you're right. Tell my kids that. My kids won't answer their phone. If I text them, they text me back, but they don't answer their phone.
You see, it's funny. What do your kids do? How many kids you have?
Three kids. My 34-year-old son, who is chief operating officer of a company called Kith, K-I-T-H. It's a retail clothing business that's based in New York, but they've got stores in LA and South Beach, Paris, all over the world. They're doing very well, and he's very good at it. And all the young kids will know what Kith is probably. It's very popular. You and I might be too old, but they know what it is. And my 28-year-old daughter works for a company called Set Active, which is a new retail business that's doing very well. Again, retail clothing business. And she's out in California getting married in May. Actually, wow. She's 20. She turned 29 last weekend. And then my youngest is 24 years old, Emmett, and he's an artist. He's plays music. He also acts. Very, very artistic young man with a lot of skills, and he's happy and healthy and living out in California too. So one of the three doesn't live in California, but we're all very close.
And how about playing tennis for them? Have they played tennis?
No, not really. My oldest, Nicholas, played when he was younger, but he got more into basketball. And my daughter played in high school, but none of them took it up real seriously, and probably are a lot more healthy up here because of it. No,
okay, I understand. You have some very good sense of humor always.
Yeah, I just got to kid around a little bit.
Of course. Let me ask you, you went to University of Tennessee, right?
Yeah, I went to University of Tennessee.
Do you have Coach DePalmer as a coach?
Coach DePalmer, was my coach in college and coach in pros, and was one of my lifelong dearest friends until he died in January of 2020. So Coach DePalmer and I have been friends since I was 13 years of age when he was back at Bollettieri's.
Yeah, he was my boss when I was in Bollettieri.
Oh, really?
1996, 97. He was the athletic director of Nick.
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay,
actually, a while ago, I got a small world, right? The tennis,
exactly.
Well, is that true? It's a small world, right?
It is. Yeah, the tennis world's very small. We all seem to circulate around, and we all cross paths. Like yours and my old friend and Nico Pereira, we keep crossing paths, and we seem to see each other periodically, and it goes a long time, and it's a nice family. The tennis family is a nice family. Yeah,
I want to take the opportunity to say thanks to Nico. He made this possible, right? Nico is part of the crew now, right? Tennis Channel crew.
He's a good man. He's a great commentator and a great friend, and just a tennis family member for so many years. And he's doing pretty well with his new knee. He's got his new knee, and he's got the surgery on his knee, and he's doing much better. And it's good to see him. He's a good guy.
Paul, what is the secret or key, whatever you want to call, to be a good commentator? TV commentator.
Good commentator. You're asking the wrong guy. I mean,
No, no, no.
you know, when I started in 2015 doing this a little bit, I tried to listen and just watch a lot of the other people. And the best advice I ever got was for Jim Courier, who I think Jim Courier is the best analyst in any sport myself. I just think he's amazing how hard he works, how much detail he does, and he's very, very concise, doesn't say too much, but it's very specific. And when you're Jim Courier and you've won as much as he's won, and you can take yourself out of the equation, but then also give wisdom from experiences you've had, it's a very tricky balance. So Jim told me when I started, he just said, look, it's not a perfect art. He said, you just have to find your voice and remember who your personality is, remember who you are, and just be true to who you are. And if you do that, then people will probably like you. But just like everything else in life, nothing's perfect. There's a lot of people that are supposedly the greatest sports talk people in the world that I happen to not like that much. So it's just a preference. So you just have to be self-assured and do the best you can. And for me, it's that finding my voice and also trying to help people that are watching understand why what happened just happened. Not what happened, but why it happened. Is it nerves? Is there a technical flaw? Is there a pattern that we're missing at home? If you can sprinkle a little bit of information that maybe they don't quite see, and then you let the action speak for itself. And sometimes I get caught up in the action too, but at the end of the sets and the end of the matches, just kind of sit there and let the players, that's the show. Let them show everyone what they do.
Paul, going back to Ballettieri, Jimmy Arias told me that those big battles in the backcourts, he mentioned you, Pablo Raya,
sure,
all the Andre later, Jim. Tell us about, for people, young coaches have no idea about a wonderful story, in the 80s, 90s.
Yeah. Look, I think I was at Ballettieri's with Jimmy Arias before Andre and those guys. And when I was at Ballettieri's, it wasn't this big factory. It was initially at the Colony Beach Resort, which was on Longboat Key. And we lived in a number of different places, some apartments, some condos. Jimmy Arias and Carling Bassett lived with Nick in his house. But really, Daniel, there was, when I went there, there was probably 50 students at the most, and probably 35 to 40 were ranked in the top 20 of the country in all different age groups. So, and then you sprinkle in people like Pablo Araya. You sprinkle in people that were on the pro tour. Brian Gottfried used to come down and practice there, and it was unbelievable. I mean, Nick is a great motivator and had a great program, but also every day I'm playing on courts with, Pablo and Jimmy Arias and Mike DePalmer Jr. And Rodney Harmon and Eric Carita. These are all people that got ranked in the top 50 of the world. So it's hard to not get better because there's so many great competitive environments, and every weekend we're playing the same tournaments together. So it was a great melting pot of tennis. It was a very special time in my life. Nick has always been a very dear friend and really, really helpful to me in terms of my career, both playing, coaching, everything I've done in tennis. Nick has been incredibly helpful. So, and some of those people are still my dearest friends. Jimmy, I work with sometimes. I still see him here.
We lost the sound, Paul. I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Paul.
Did I lose you or my back? My back?
You're back.
Okay.
It was just a double fault.
I thought it it was a let cord, and I thought the let was in. So I'm gonna ask the Hawkeye if they can
The
Yeah, I
Charles.
think the Hawkeye's gonna say that it was actually on the line, so we'll play a let. But it was
Replay the
just,
part.
yeah, it was just a very special time in my life, Daniel. Just a lot of great people that I'm still good
Yeah.
friends with, and I learned a lot. And I think most importantly, someone told me this once. It's, I've been so lucky. I mean, I followed a dream when I was a kid, and then the dream, as it got closer, it became a goal. Like, I think the first thing you do is you dream. That doesn't mean you necessarily can get there. And then all of a sudden, as you start to develop, you create a goal from that. That becomes more realistic. It's a goal. And then the goal starts to unfold. And once it unfolds, your dream becomes your reality because you're actually doing it. And so I've just followed that process my whole life. And I've been so fortunate to play tennis, to coach tennis, to commentate on tennis, all over the world. I met wonderful people. I've coached, terrific tennis players, but more importantly, better people. I've been very lucky with the people that I've coached because they're all wonderful. Pete and Roger and Sloan and Tim Henman, and Taylor Fritz, all just wonderful people. So I've been really, really lucky. And now working at Tennis Channel, my bosses and the people that I get to work with, they're terrific people. And so we really have a good time. And because we're working in something that we love, it doesn't feel like work to me. I really enjoy it.
Paul, is something missing in the new wave of American players? We have a group of guys coming, but what is missing, still missing, or something that still needs to be fixed, or to see those guys breaking through the top 10, winning a Grand Slam?
I think, Daniel, one of the biggest issues is that in America, I think we've become a little bit spoiled, and we don't compromise. All we want are greats. We want the best of everything, and that's great. That's what makes us passionate in everything we do. That's what makes us excel, and also achieve huge goals. But I also think it's dangerous because historically we've been spoiled. We've been able to have, Jimmy Connors and John McEnroe. Before that, Arthur Ashe and Stan Smith. And after Jimmy and John, I played kind of after Jimmy and John, and I got to be 12 in the world. Tim Mayotte was top 5 for a while. I think Brad got to be top 5. Scott Davis was top 15. But that whole time we were playing, people were complaining because there was no one that was great. And that's fine because they're used to Connors and McEnroe and the history of it. And so I think we've struggled a little bit because those things happen. But then what happened after we retired? Then Agassi, Sampras, Courier, Michael Chang, that crew came along. And then when they stopped, there was a little bit of a lull, and then Andy came along, and Andy unfortunately came along in an era with Roger and Rafa and Novak, and Andy only won one major, but he was better than that. He could have won a lot more. So I think now what's happened is the globalization of tennis has caught up to the United States. I think because tennis is so popular around the world that it actually has caught up to us in the United States. One of the biggest challenges, I think, in the United States is one thing that people think is our biggest asset. They think our biggest asset is our size. I actually think it's one of our biggest challenges because I actually feel that in order to create the best environment for the best players to reach the level you're talking about, you need a little bit more of a centralization of what's going on. The United States is so big. There's some terrific players in California. There's some in Texas. There's some in New York. There's some in Florida. There's some in Idaho. They're all over the place, but they're so far away that they don't get to see each other every single day. And that was one of the magic pills, I think, that Nick Bollettieri created back when I was at Bollettieri's. you're playing. I'm on the court every day with Pablo and Jimmy Arias and
Mm.
Rodney Harmon. I can't not. I mean, I'm gonna get. There's no way I can't get better. You know, that's impossible to not get better. And so now, because the size of our country is so big, I actually think it's really difficult to get the best players, the best coaches, and the best programs together enough to really help that talent pool flourish. I think we're doing really well. I mean, I think we are doing really well. And if you look now, what's going on, in particular at the men's game with the different
Mm.
layers of ages. You know, you have the young guys like Seb Corda and Brandon
Mm.
and Jensen Brooksby. Then you have Taylor's group with Taylor and Riley and Big Foe and Tommy Paul. And then you have a group after that as well. John's still around.
Mm.
So now you have kind of the environment that I think is really a good, healthy one. And those guys are out on the tour. The question is, how do you do that for the kids that are under 18? And I think that's a challenge because it takes a lot of effort to do it. I started helping a little bit with the Southern Cal Tennis Association last year, and I do a few different things throughout the year. And part of the stuff that Trevor Croneman and Scott Lipsky and Diane Matthias and the group and Frank are trying, Giampaolo are trying to put together are more environments like this, where all of
Mm.
a sudden we have the better kids together all the time. And not so, I don't want to coach any of them. I mean, I don't want to take anybody's player. I want the kids to come with their coaches, and I want them to get educated by sports science people, by nutritionists, by sports psychologists, by all the different areas of the game that can help all these players get better. And I think in Southern Cal, Trevor Croneman's really trying to do a nice job in creating a team concept where that's going to be a little bit more prevalent. And that's the idea. That's a microcosm, Daniel, of what
Mm.
you want to do in the United States, I think. And then that's one of the challenges that national player development is facing right now is the size of the country. They can't cover everything. They whatever their budget is, $12 million. That sounds like a lot of money. It's not a lot of money with the size of this country and as many players as you're trying to help. So to try to get the talent pool deeper, you want more layers in the different levels of all the rankings, junior rankings, then have those people understand that there's a great pathway to get to college tennis if you're not ready for the pros. And if you want to go to the pros, there's another pathway as well. So there's multiple pathways for kids to maximize their talent. And one of my favorite things about tennis, now that I'm an old timer, is tennis teaches you life skills. It
Mm.
teaches you how to deal with adversity. And unlike team sports, one of the reasons I fell in love with tennis, and I love it even more as a coach, is it's up to you to figure it out on the court. You have no one out there to have a timeout, to bring in somebody from the bullpen, someone off the bench. You have to figure it out. So our job as coaches is to help give the kids the tools to learn how to deal with that pressure and with that adversity. And for me, if you do that on the tennis court, you're going to do that in life. You're going to learn how to deal with things in life. And that's why I love tennis. So if you look at all those different components, I think there's a lot of moving parts in order to get back to what you talked about. You asked a very simple question at the beginning about what's missing. I'm not sure there's an answer. I'm not sure there is an answer to say, why don't we have two people in the top 10 in men's, two people in the top 10 in women's, two more in the top 10. You know, I don't know that there's an answer, but I feel as a tennis person that if we could create more environments where we get the best players, coaches, resources, and facilities together more often, that would happen. Now, what we also need is satellite facilities
Mm.
around. And Patrick McEnroe started this back in the day when he was running player development with his regional training programs. I think that's a great idea. There's 17 sections in the United States. Let's figure out how to maximize all the sections and also keep our antenna up for the super elite in those sections to then help them to the pathway to pro tennis. And the others give them pathways to learn and get better and get to college. And then maybe you're a John Isner. You know, maybe
Mm.
you're James Blake who went to Harvard for a year. Maybe you're someone that goes through that pathway. So people are looking for a magic pill and one way. And
Mm.
as you and I know, there isn't one way. There's lots of different ways, but within those ways, there are a lot of common threads about discipline, about professionalism, about habit forming, about the ability to deal with adversity. All those things are created, and basically all the great players have those.
Fantastic, Paul. I want to take you back to your coaching job.
Sure.
How was the first day with a big player, big champion? I mean, the first day that you go to the practice court with Pete, with Roger, what do you do the first day?
Um,
Oh.
it's interesting. Pete was very different because Pete and I were friends. I was 8 years older than Pete, and I knew him since he was a kid. And it was a very difficult situation because his coach Tim Gullickson was diagnosed with brain tumors and brain cancer. So that for me was really difficult. And luckily, Tim Gully was amazing for me. He tutored me, he mentored me. His brother Tom helped me a lot to try to help understand the environment that I was getting thrown into. To be with a 23-year-old who was #1 in the world, that's challenging. And Pete and I also had a really very candid and open relationship, so that it was very easy for us to kind of come together and manage the environment. And the environment was really simple, Daniel. The environment for me was to do the best I could so that Gully could do the best he could to get well and come back and coach again. Now, that didn't happen. Gully succumbed to the brain cancer. But because of both Gullys and because of Pete, my first kind of month or two with Pete was a pretty smooth transition, which could have been very difficult because of the situation. But a lot of it was because of them. And the other part for me that I think was one of my biggest assets was I kind of went into it with my ears open and my antenna up. I didn't go into it saying, Pete, just do this, just do that. I went into it trying to absorb information. And I think if there's one thing I could tell any young coach, please know what you don't know. Put your antenna up and just listen for a while. Just listen. There's a lot of different things that happen that can go on that can change how you want to operate. So be a really good listener. And so from Pete's situation, I then I went on to coach Tim Henman, who's a top 5 player in the world. And Tim and I were very good friends, and it was very easy transition because I'd known him for a long time. And then after that, when I went to Roger, we had I'd known Roger through Tim and also through Pete, but we had a couple meetings first, a couple dinners, and we talked about his tennis and where he was in his career. He basically said, what do you think I can do to continue to improve? And he was for as great as he was, he was so open-minded and willing to converse. I think that's one of the biggest assets Federer has, is that he's got opinions and ideas, but he listens. He's an unbelievable listener, and he's a great digester of information. He's really good at understanding information and figuring out if and how it applies to him. And so we had a few meetings, we talked about it, and then we had a little trial period and in Switzerland. And I remember the first day we went on the court and he was warming up and he just looked at me and said, okay, what do you want me to do? I said, laughed. I said, what do you mean, what do I want you to do? Is it that easy? And he said, yeah, but I might ask you why you want me to do it if I'm not sure I understand that it's purposeful for my game. And so that was just the kind of the first brick in the relationship where it was a very good communication stream. Severin Luthi, who was his coach and still is, was amazing. To me, he's one of the best coaches out there, doesn't get nearly enough credit. Severin helped me so much get acclimated to Roger's environment, and also Mirka.
Sorry,
Mirka,
Paul,
right? Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Why you think Luthi is not getting
because people come in. Tony Roach came in to help. Pepe, Jose Higueras came in to help. Then I came in to help. Then Edberg came in to help. So all these guys are coming in. In the meantime, Severin's there for 90% of all of us. So he's helping guide all of us. He's getting all of our information while giving us information and also helping us navigate Roger's landscape, which is a very complicated landscape. He's a global icon. It's a very busy life that he has. So it's a lot more than just forehands and backhands. I think now Severn's starting to get the credit he deserves. I know people have talked to him in the past about him coaching them. And I don't know if he wants to do that anymore after Roger's done or whatever, but he is very, very bright man. And to me, he made it incredibly easy to transition into the team and his management team. Tony Godsick does a great job, and Tony helped outline the role for me. And the biggest thing, like I said, Daniel, too, is Roger, he's a great communicator. You know, whenever there's a big decision, we sit around as a team and we talk about it. He's not a yes person. He openly allows us to say, Raj, you know, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that's the right way, and here's why. And he listens to it. And ultimately, it's his decision at the end of the day, but he's very good at hearing things maybe he doesn't want to hear. And he takes a deep breath and digests it and weighs the scenario and then makes a decision. But when you're someone like him and you allow people the freedom to think and plan and give you ideas that maybe aren't exactly what you want to hear, that lends itself to amazing growth. And I think he's one of the most unique people on the planet that I've met that's achieved what he's achieved. But he's still so open-minded and so kind of humble and gracious when he hears stuff that he thinks probably isn't the right thing for him. So anyway, that's kind of it. But I've been spoiled. All those people they're all great. You know, Henman, Federer, and Pete were my first three big names, and they were all great. And I'll tell you right now, I'm sure I learned a lot more from them than they learned from me.
Well, and it's coincidentally three guys with one-handed backhand, right? And now Taylor is a two-handed backhand.
Right.
Any change in adjustment in your coaching?
No, not really. I mean, to me, once a player gets to that stage, it's about understanding their game. And I think I understand Taylor's game pretty well. And he's nothing like any of the guys that I just mentioned. He's very different game style-wise. The game has changed a lot more. And he's very different personality-wise. So I've got to figure out, look, my biggest theme, Daniel, in terms of coaching an individual sport, tell me if you agree with this, but in an individual sport, if you're going to be really successful at what you do with really, elite players, you have to figure out how to say what you want to say the way they need to hear it. Different players, okay? In team sports, like here in the United States, players conform to the coach's philosophy. So a football coach doesn't have to deal individually and say the same thing 53 different ways to the football team. The basketball coach, Greg Popovich in San Antonio, the players conform to him. They come in, they conform to him. A baseball manager, same thing. Individual sports person, I'd like to hear what golfing, people think, because I'd be interested to hear that. I think individual coaches, in particular in tennis, like I've got to figure out how to tell Taylor something that the way he'll need to receive it. And I needed to tell Roger something that I told Pete, but I have to say it in a very different way because they're different people. If I told Roger and Pete the same thing, Pete, you have to be clear, concise, very short and direct, and be able to back it up quickly. Roger is more of a conversationalist. You can tell him that. You can talk about it. You'll look at video. He'll discuss things. He's much more open. So there's a different philosophy. Taylor, who's 24 years of age, is really opinionated. He's very strong-willed. And I think that's one of his biggest assets. And at times it can be one of his biggest challenges. It's one of his biggest assets because he's an incredible competitor and he's a great fighter. But sometimes he gets in his own way because he needs sometimes to be a little bit more open. And he's getting better and has gotten better. But if Taylor didn't have the strong will that he has, that stubbornness, he wouldn't be 17 in the world right now either. So there's a balance with all of that stuff. And as a coach, I think it's my job to figure out how to manage all of that.
Fantastic. Paul, help me with this, and you're going to help a lot of coaches. We've been told in the last few years, stats, numbers, 70+% of the points are ending in the first 4 shots. But this is the problem that I see, Paul. coaches teaching the young kids to try in practice to finish the points within the first four, shots.
Right.
And they seems, in my opinion, to rush sometimes.
Right.
And it's kind of that information. I don't know. It's coming across. I don't know. How do you? What is your advice to coaches developing players?
Look, I think one of the biggest challenges now, Daniel, is putting the numbers and the metrics and the analytics with the practical application. I think in isolation, neither work to their best ability. If I just go out with my, old school thoughts with a bucket of balls and I hit 6,000 balls and I don't take any of that into account, I'm not maximizing the impact I can have for the player. If someone gives me a spreadsheet with 17 numbers on it and they talk about the numbers in isolation, I'm not maximizing what I can do with the player. I'll give you a great example of this, okay? Pete Sampras, okay? Back in the day, I was trying to get him to chip in charge and come into the net behind second serves because he was a great athlete and he was good at the net, and you want to impose your will and impose your athleticism. And he didn't like doing that because it felt like it was a risk. Why should I do that? Because if the guy gets lucky with one shot, he'll pass me. And I said, but you're such a great athlete. If you do it at the right time and you do it often enough, you're going to get better at it. So we debated. And in Australia, he was playing a match, and in the first set, he chipped and charged 4 times, okay? And he didn't win any of those points. And he ended up winning the match like 7-6, 7-5, 6-2 or something. So after the match, he comes off, and I said, Pete, great first set. You set the tone. You chipped and charged 4 times. And he goes, yeah, but I didn't win any of those points. And I said, yeah, but you got 2 double faults in the tiebreak. Why do you think you got 2 double faults in the tiebreak? Where does that show up in the stat sheet? All it shows up is 2 double faults, but not why. And all it shows up is 0 for 4 chipping and charging in the first set. So if I'm just looking at the numbers, then it doesn't make sense, right? 0 for 4, don't do it anymore, right? So you have to put why things are happening together with the numbers and the situation that's going on. So if you see the situation, I could go, okay, 0 for 4, that's not great, but hey, tiebreak, you got those 2 double faults and 1-7-3 in the tiebreak. That's the pressure from losing those 4 chip and charges at 1-2, 2-3, 2-4, and 2-5. That's where you get the freebies. So numbers in isolation, to me, you have to be very careful with. And a ball hopper with just feeding balls and doing drills without any metrics or analytics, you got to be really careful with. And I'm learning as I go along. I listen to all the metrics people. I read the stuff that they do, and I try to make it applicable to how it works for my player. Because also every player is different. You have to figure out how it plugs into what they need to do, their style of play. And so it's a matter of putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And again, Daniel, I don't think you can do any of this in isolation, and I don't think there's one way to do it. I think there's a lot of things you can learn. And every time I look at some of these analytic folks and I look at what they come up with, and I learn stuff, it's great. But I would never just throw those numbers out there randomly. I would never throw them out there randomly. And I always look for the why behind the situation. The why, meaning why did that happen? I don't ever look at 42%. If I talk to Taylor about his first serve percentage, and he'll say, geez, I served great, and I served 66%, but I only won 53% of my serves. I'm like, yeah, because you're missing your targets. You miss your target by 4 inches at the top of the game, and you might as well be at neutral. So the margins are that narrow. So you have to look at the numbers behind all the statistical analysis. Otherwise, I feel like you're playing darts in the dark.
And I heard the story, Paul, that Pete Sampras, when he was playing Andre Agassi, increased the speed of the second serve like 7 miles an hour. That is, I'm right with that?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Because Andre was one of the best returners, right? So
he said, it was the finals of Wimbledon in 1995, maybe, or 97, and Pete's second serve speed went up 7 miles an hour against
Mm.
Andre in the finals. And so when I was going through the stats with him the next day or 2 days after or whatever, I said that to him and I said, how is that and why is that? And he said, well, Andre's the best returner in the world, so I have to. And the second reason is because I can. I know I can. And I said, does it feel like a risk? He said, not really. He said, because I have to. It frees me up because Andre's a great returner, and I believe I can hit my serve that big and still hit my targets. I was like, interesting. So how do you teach someone that at the finals of Wimbledon? How do you teach someone that kind of feel and the ability? That's a tough one. I wish I could say it's my idea. Can't do that though, Daniel.
Paul, we have 10 more minutes. Time flies. I know you're busy. You have a call in 10 minutes, right? 6:30. Yeah. This time goes so fast. A couple more questions, Paul. Thank you. Once again, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure listening. I'm learning a lot. Do's and don'ts for young coaches who wants to succeed in the professional tour, Paul.
Do's and don'ts. The do's are keep your eyes and ears open, learn as much as you can, and understand that you don't know everything. And try to be really aware of patterns and things that are being successful around you. And what I mean by that is look at everything. Coaches' programs, why are there, coaches that do mostly academies or program stuff, why is their program successful? What are the habits? What do they do that makes it successful? And maybe what are they missing? And then look at the patterns with the individual players that are creating good habits and try to be aware of those things. And I think most importantly, and one of the reasons I think I can actually still coach a little bit is because I try to look ahead. I try to go, what's going to happen 3-4 years from now? So I try to look at what I think is valuable and what's going to be valuable 3 or 4 years from now. What do you see the evolution of the game? More of the players are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". What does that mean? No players are coming to the net very much anymore. Why is that? All these different questions, and put yourself into the future and figure out how to do that. And I think most importantly, be true to yourself. Know who you are as a person and always put the player first and understand with an empathetic view that they're doing the best they can, and try to understand what they're coming from where they're coming from so that you can help smooth out most of the self-imposed pressure that they go through.
Paul, last question. I had the privilege to talk to Uncle Tony Nadal last Friday.
He's a great guy. He's a great guy.
But I want to hear from you your thoughts about Rafa. Rafa Nadal.
I think, to me, he's the greatest tennis competitor I've ever seen. I've never seen – the closest person I've ever seen probably is Jimmy Connors. And I think Rafa, if you watch Rafa hit a ball in practice and you watch him play 4-all in the 5th set at Wimbledon, you wouldn't notice the difference. And I've never seen an athlete that's more in tune with the philosophy of playing every single point like your life depends on it. I've never seen anyone that can do it like that. And that's all about training. That's all about practice. That has become normal for him. So it's not like he's making them, that's just normal for him. There's no other way around it. So that mentality, along with his incredible physical skills, people don't realize how good he is physically. He's so strong. His endurance is amazing. People don't understand also, I don't think, how great of a volleyer he is. He's unbelievable up at the net. And most importantly, Daniel, I think he understands his game so well. He understands why he's successful. And in those moments of huge pressure, because he's been there so often, he can rely on that knowledge of that comfort of understanding his game so well. And when you put all those things together, he has relentless optimism. He's an unconditional competitor. And all that matters is the next point. Nothing else matters. The next point's the only thing that matters. What happened 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago, doesn't matter. What might happen 10 years from doesn't matter. All that matters is the next point, and to give myself the best chance to play it as well as I can. And if you have that mentality, it's almost impossible not to maximize your talent. It's almost impossible because every time he practices, that's what he's done since he's a little kid. So I give Tony Nadal so much credit for helping put together an incredible foundation around Rafa. Ultimately, the player drives it, so Rafa has done it, and I give that man an incredible amount of claps because of what he's gone through with the physical stuff and his ability to just enjoy what he does. And what he did down in Australia for me was amazing. He had no right winning the finals, and he did. And that just tells you how great he is.
Exactly. I have a question for the audience, and I let you go because
Sure,
I'm very grateful for people listening and watching. How do you play the famous big points? What we should do when the big point, and which one are the big points?
Right. Well, that is, what are the big points? And for me, that's where these great players are. They've been there so many times. I mean, even with Taylor still at 17 in the world, we talk about playing big points, and we talk about how everybody's nervous. Everybody gets nervous. Rafa still gets nervous. Roger still gets nervous. No, they all get nervous. So what do you do in that situation? The great players have been there so much that their average gets them through that. What I mean by that is Rafa has an unbelievable amount of margin in his game because of the weight of shot, the topspin, the great footwork. Novak, again, because of his movement and the simplicity of his strokes. Those guys, to me, are much safer in big moments than Roger. And that's probably why Roger has lost more matches having match points, because he's so offensive. It's really difficult to be that offensive all the time, particularly when there's a ton of pressure. But Roger also knows his game, so he knows what he has to do in those big moments. So for me, it's all about managing pressure, managing expectation, and knowing what you can do with your average level. Because if you're a great mover and on an average level, play your average level at a pressure-filled situation with great movement and really good discipline and shot selection, at every level you're at, you're probably going to be really successful. That's what I've seen.
Fantastic, Paul. Thank you. I will keep talking 3 more hours. I hope one day we can have a coffee, and I will love it.
Well, let me know. I'd like to. I hope we can too, Daniel. You know how to get in touch with me, and hopefully I'll see you this spring at one of the Southern Cal tournaments.
I will.
Venues, and yeah.
I will go to Indian Wells, so I hope I see you there.
Good. You look me up. We'll say hello.
I will. Thank you so much. And before you leave, the best player from South America that you ever seen?
The best player from South America that I've ever seen. I have a soft spot in my heart, okay? Because I was a tennis agent for 2 years, and I represented Gaston Gaudio.
Okay.
And I love Gaston. And I represented him before he won the French Open. And one of the only things I said to my boss before he was 35 in the world, I said, if this kid, things go right, he could win the French Open one day. And he did.
Look at that.
And I love Gaston. But look, Marcelo Rios was phenomenal, right? Guillermo Coria was phenomenal. Guillermo Vilas was phenomenal. Andres Gomez, these people probably don't know all those, but all those guys are in the same category. And one of the things I won't do, and I want to say thank you very much. You might be the first person I've ever talked to that said, who's better, Roger or Pete? You're the first person that hasn't asked me that, I think, in one of these. So thank you very much for asking me that, and for not asking me that. And the reason I don't do it is because I just think you can't compare eras. I just don't see. I think they're all greats. It's fun to talk about. I don't see. It's a different game. I mean, you can't tell me that if Rod Laver was born in Pete's era, he wouldn't have been great. He would have been unbelievable. And you can't tell me that if Rafa had a wood racket, he wouldn't have been successful in the Vilas and Borgs era. So it makes for great conversation, but it's just everyone's opinion. I like to be a tennis fan, Daniel, and sit back and go, they're all great, and I love watching them.
The same, and I was very careful with the questions because I know.
You have to be careful. Now that I'm a TV guy, I know how to talk around that stuff, so it's no problem.
Paul, thank you so very much.
Thank you. I hope we can do it again, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in Indian Wells.
No, I will for sure, Paul.
Perfect.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much, Paul.
Daniel.
Thanks,
Take care of
everybody. It was
yourself.
amazing. Thank you,
Ciao,
guys.
ciao,
I'll see you,
ciao.
Paul.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Congratulations to your daughter. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Take
Ciao,
care.
ciao.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye, guys. Bye, everybody. Bye.